If you've been following this channel for some time, you'll know that I've been a huge fan of Russell Wilson. He's a player that I've always liked simply because of his playstyle. For every bad throw or bad decision he made, Wilson would more than make up for that by using his arms or legs. Routinely, Wilson would avoid a sack, then he would throw an amazing pass down the sideline to DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett. This playstyle was both frustrating to watch, but at the same time, it was extremely exhilarating, especially when Wilson was on fire. It became so routine that at a certain point, you just kind of expected this to be how he played throughout the rest of his career. Well, this theory is being put into test this season with the Denver Broncos. Now that we've entered the 11th season in the NFL, things seem to be falling apart. In this video, I wanted to see why this was the case and what's happening with Russell Wilson in Denver. Before we begin, if you can do me a huge favor and like and subscribe to my channel, I would greatly appreciate it. So anyways, as I was going through Russell Wilson's film against the Tennessee Titans, it seems like everyone was focused on the 4th down interception that ended the game. Yes, this was obviously not a good throw. The ball clearly sailed from him over his intended target, and the pass was picked off. While this was clearly bad, I actually thought the previous play right before this one was actually worse. I know this doesn't offer a lot of comfort to Broncos fans, but I put this sack and this almost lost fumble on Russell Wilson. This play came on 3rd and 4. The Titans have a single high safety deep and are playing man-to-man on the Broncos receivers. On the left side, you have a man-beating concept featuring a seam route that acts like a rub, while Greg Dulcich runs a quick out route aiming for the sideline. Dulcich runs this route perfectly. He chops his feet at the 17-yard line, and he sits and waits for Tyree Cleveland to pass him before he broke to the outside. As soon as Cleveland crossed the 15, Dulcich cut on his route. Dulcich is now open for a quick throw and catch here that would have picked up the 1st down. However, instead of seeing Dulcich get open as planned, Wilson incorrectly moved on. His eyes are already shifting back to the center of the field and he's looking for his 3rd read. Since that player is covered by the lurking linebacker, Wilson holds onto it and he's taken down for a sack. With a quick rhythm-based throw, this would have been a 1st down. Unfortunately, Wilson missed this underneath pass, and this was one of the big reasons why the Broncos lost this game. Now, the issue with pointing out a play like this one is that by pointing it out, I'm telling you guys that quarterbacks don't make mistakes. On the contrary, quarterbacks make mistakes all the time. The issue with Russell Wilson is that he's been making basic mistakes like this one for most of his career. Even earlier against the Titans, Wilson did the same exact thing. He missed a flat route on the spot concept out of the end zone. The ball should have been out immediately after seeing the linebacker get out leverage, and this would have been a positive play. Like I just mentioned, it's been happening before with the Seahawks, and it's obviously still happening with the Denver Broncos. So the obvious question is, why is this a bigger issue now? The answer to this is actually a very simple one. Whenever Wilson would make mistakes like this one, he would more than make up for it with a big throw or a crazy scramble to keep the Seahawks offense on the field. Even that flat route was immediately followed up by a big play down the sideline. Russell Wilson hit this corner out perfectly and he deserves a lot of credit for making this throw. The issue though is that big plays like this one are too few and too far between. Wilson has always used the big play to make up for his bad throws. Now that these big plays simply aren't coming, and a lot of that has to do with poor accuracy at all levels of the field, the bad is finally outweighing the good. To illustrate this point further, let me show you a couple of advanced stats. Check out his big time throw versus his turnover-worthy play rate back when he was a quarterback with the Seahawks. Basically, the way to read this chart is that the further to the top and to the left, the better you are. This means you create a higher percent of big time throws as compared to your turnover-worthy plays. In 2021, Russell Wilson was elite in this ability. He's been that way for the vast majority of his career. His turnover-worthy play percentage was respectable at 2.5%, and he was near the top of big time throws at over 6% in the Seahawks offense. Jumping forward to this season with the Broncos, Russell Wilson has drastically fallen in this graph. Instead of being in the elite category at the top left, Wilson is somewhere near average. He fell from a 6.1 big time throw rate down to 3.4, and his turnover-worthy play rate increased from 2.5 to 3.2. From watching the Broncos film, it's very clear this is having a big impact on this offense. The mere fact that Wilson is not creating these big plays in this offense anymore is definitely affecting their ability to score. Before we look at our next example, I want to give a huge shout out to HelloFresh for sponsoring this week's video. With the holidays here, HelloFresh makes this busy time easier. No grocery stores, no stressful meal planning, just everything to prepare a wholesome and delicious meal all delivered to your door. This week, my wife and I tried the sweet chili pork bowls. This meal was so incredibly good. The produce was fresh, the meat was amazing to fill both of us up, and having pre-portioned ingredients all in one place made this entire experience simple. With HelloFresh, you can spend less time meal planning and prepping and more time enjoying their high-quality ingredients. From the farm to your home in less than 7 days, so you know everything is fresh. Also, HelloFresh is cheaper than grocery store shopping and 25% less expensive than takeout. If you go to HelloFresh.com and use my code SAMGOLD70, you'll get 70% off plus free shipping. Again, go to HelloFresh.com and use my code SAMGOLD70 for 70% off plus free shipping. Now, before the break, I mentioned that Russell Wilson relied on the big-time throws in order to make up for his mistakes. When you watch him, the first thing you need to understand is that in order to create those big plays, Wilson often held onto the ball for far too long in order to make that happen. We talk about this a lot with quarterbacks, that they're often responsible for a good percent of their sacks. This is definitely true for Russell Wilson. Wilson has been anywhere from very bad to below average in taking responsibility for his own sacks. That's just simply who he is. The reason why this is very important to understand is based on all the injuries to the Broncos offensive line. Throughout the 2022 season, Pro Football Focus has the Broncos ranked as the 20th offensive line in pass blocking efficiency. While on the surface this isn't bad, this number is very deceiving. The Broncos were top 12 throughout the first 5 games of the year. After that, disaster struck this offensive line and they dealt with a bunch of injuries. Both left tackle Garrett Bowles and right tackle Billy Turner were lost for the year. Also, the Broncos center Lloyd Cushenberry has also been dealing with injuries too. As I just mentioned, the Broncos offensive line was actually solid throughout the first 5 weeks of the season. Unfortunately, after all those injuries occurred, they moved down to the bottom 5 over the past 5 weeks. Against the Titans most recently, Russell Wilson was under pressure on 49% of his dropbacks. It's clearly not getting any better. So at this point, we have a Russell Wilson problem where he's missing reads and not making up for it with the big play, and then we also have issues with the offensive line. The third thing that's happening is also a very basic one. The Broncos receiving core, including the running backs, have the highest combined drop rate in the entire NFL. They have dropped 10.8% of their catchable passes. The average for a team is right around 6%. So even when Wilson isn't missing reads or not making a big throw or simply getting pressured, his receivers are struggling to hold onto his passes. So outside of these issues, the other thing I noticed with the Broncos is more of a general one as I went through the film. The lack of chemistry with these receivers is extremely apparent on scramble drills and other timing-based concepts. Multiple passes where Russell Wilson expected the receiver to be sitting between his zone, and the receiver often ended up nowhere near where the ball was going to be. These communication problems have happened all season. In fact, Tyler Columbus, who is a former offensive lineman for the Broncos, he claims that Russell Wilson is still using audibles and code words back from his time with the Seahawks. He also claims that none of the other players on the team know what they mean. Now, I'm not going to claim that this is 100% true, and I'm also going to point out that others have already refuted this claim, but back in week 1 against the Seahawks, Tyler Lockett was seen pointing out some of Wilson's hand signals on the sideline. He showed that he's still using the same signals back from the time he was with the Seahawks. While we know that part is true, the rest of the previous statement still remains to be seen. Regardless, the important point from all of this though is the lack of chemistry that Russell Wilson has with the rest of his team is very apparent. Now, another thing that I'm going to bring up is more on the side of play calling. This scheme features a lot of the standard concept that Wilson loves running. I've seen spacing and stick from the quick game, I've seen smash against 2-high defense, and I've also seen them run naked bootleg while pairing that with flood concepts toward the sideline. One thing I noticed while going through the Broncos film was that the Titans seemed to have a very good understanding of the exact play call Denver was running. The Titans keyed on the outside receiver running hitches, and they actually baited that throw multiple times in order to try to create turnovers. For example, they would send a fire zone blitz to that side, and then they would drop a linebacker underneath. This wasn't a one-time thing. They did this multiple times throughout this game. The Titans basically knew what the route the outside receiver was running, the defense then shut it down, and they were able to force a sack or check down. It was a very good defensive system against this offense, and the Titans were clearly able to take advantage of the predictability of the scheme. Now, the final thing that I'm going to bring up is the injuries that Russell Wilson has been facing. According to reports, Wilson has been facing a hamstring injury as well as pain in his throwing shoulder. Once again, I'm not going to argue the truth or the myth behind these claims. Whether he's injured or not definitely affects things like accuracy, which has been iffy all season. The one thing that these injuries does not impact though is missing basic reads that I've seen him make accurate throws even while dealing with these potential injuries. These misreads are definitely on him, and I think we can separate these misses from Russell Wilson's injuries very clearly. To wrap this up, what we're facing with the Broncos is a huge problem from the top down. You have poor blocking due to injuries, you have receivers that refuse to catch the ball, you have the potential for miscommunication where Wilson and the team aren't on the same page, and you have a clear lack of big-time playmaking ability that isn't happening due to poor throws down the field. Combined together, this is a major problem. This is why the Broncos offense has been stuttering all season, and this is why there isn't a ton of hope from them throughout the rest of the year. The good news though is that with more time and more practice, and with these players getting healthy once again, I think we'll see an improvement next year. I'll say it this way, it certainly can't get much worse, but hopefully Russell Wilson and the Broncos will be able to fix what's broken. Well, that's all I have for you. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to support the channel directly, feel free to follow the link to my Patreon account below. Also, you can find me on Twitter at SamuelRGold.